It's the 12th of February, 2025. Coming up on today's Global Intelligence Agency Operations Report. The Trump deep state operatives are continuing what we are calling the culling. They are getting rid of their own people, mainly, well, because they can't afford it. The King of Jordan arrived in the U.S. over the weekend on an impromptu visit. Was this really all about Gaza? And you have heard the rumors about red mercury on the internet. But have you heard of blue, green, and even orange? How was it really used? And Marduke had a secret covenant with Anti-Source. And today's full moon was his last day to complete his mission, even after his death. Well, it's the 12th of February. We've made it almost to the middle of the month. And, well, let's just say I was right as far as the bumpy time. A little bit bumpy. Lots going on, both in the news and out of the news, and that's trickling into the major effects that we're going to see this weekend. So, so I guess we can kind of get to it. So today, apparently, in a bunch of meetings, I am being blamed by different groups for the actions that are taking place coming from the Doge department, the Department of Government Efficiency. I have explained to these people that called me, and this was a military person, who had called me to ask me if I am involved in the actions that are taking place. And adamantly, including some swear words, which I won't say on a broadcast, I told them no. I actually passed Finance 101 and I understand the ramifications of my own actions. Therefore, there is no way I could be involved with these crazy people. And I said it, well, let's just say a little stern, more stern than I'm saying it now. And then I called around a little bit to try to see where this is coming from. So it turns out, there are many people who retire from government positions, let's just say, and or are involved with government in some way, shape, or form, who are not getting paid on their contracts. Now, some of these people have legitimate contracts. They provide services like, for example, paving roads. They have a contracts to pave roads, and every year they pave roads. Not to say that there aren't some interesting contracts that are out there, but mainly these are people that the Trump operatives have promised would get contracts during this administration for their support during the campaign rallies and otherwise. There have been a lot of people, including Mr. Musk, who was promised a lot of government contracts. So that being said, I didn't make those promises. I wasn't there in the meeting. Don't talk to those people. I definitely and clearly am not driving that bus in any way, shape, or form. And everybody pretty much needs to understand I've kind of frozen out government, period, worldwide. I've sort of been doing my own thing over here because I'm anticipating, based on the events that I see, that we're probably not going to have government at the rate that they're going. They are reckless. They are now cutting some of those contracts that they made during their campaign promises, and it's causing quite a stir behind the scenes. There are a number of other financial, let's just say, money magic schemes that were attempted over the weekend as well, and over the last couple of days, which is the reason why I didn't do the news on Monday, because I needed to make sure everything was cleaned up before I made some of this information public. So that's important. But as far as blaming me, that was pretty much a wrong move. The other thing that took place over the weekend was the Super Bowl here in America. And I'm sure many of you watching this or listening to this, I should say, have heard of the Super Bowl, even if you are in another country. It's one of the largest and most heavily watched events all year in the United States. It's very popular amongst people that don't even pay attention to football often watch this event. If nothing else, it supposedly has a pretty good halftime show and people like that, even if you're not interested in the game. They also watch the commercials because allegedly they are extremely expensive commercials to play or to buy during the Super Bowl because of the amount of views that the Super Bowl gets. But in addition to that, people kind of put, or companies put their best foot forward due to the expense. And a lot of them are kind of funny and they start trending after that kind of thing. So anyway, we as Americans watch the game even if you're not interested in football. I personally didn't watch the game. I was busy doing something else. I haven't watched a Super Bowl in probably over a decade at this point in time, and nor do I care to. I'm just not interested in sports unless I'm playing them. So that's kind of me. Okay, so the Super Bowl. During the Super Bowl, because it took place, let's say Lionsgate, number 1 of the year, or the what's called the Spring Lionsgate, was on Saturday. They had anticipated that they were going to get access to some pretty heavy stuff by Sunday. If they had gotten that access, they had a plan to publicly, on the most heavily watched event of the year, to assassinate Donald Trump. And that was coming from his own people in his own circle. This was their operatives. Matter of fact, Department of Homeland Security was on high alert due to a number of different instances in the chatter that was going on behind the scenes. Allegedly, the Trump operatives planned on blaming Iran for this event. Of course, it would have been an Iranian citizen, however, they got into the country. They were talking about crazy things like surface to air missiles and all kinds of things that they were planning on doing. Now, clearly, these people are a little crazy, as we've talked about before, and this would have been an extremely, let's just say, fearful event, and due to security concerns, they believed they could have made this the last Super Bowl to ever exist in the US. Needless to say, they didn't get what they were looking for, and we'll talk about that a little later. They didn't get what they were looking for, and said event was pretty much canceled. Speaking of canceled, it seems as if we have, the United States anyway, there seems to be some confusion amongst the executive branch, Trump operatives, and as to who is actually governing the government. We've always had governors over government, and government really doesn't control anything at all. That being said, even if we were to just look at the government as an actual governing body, which they are not, uh, you still can't bark out executive orders like they're hotcakes and then expect everybody to follow them, because they don't follow what people see. Uh, and I mean people that work within the government and some of the people in the court system and so on and so forth. They don't see anything but the Constitution and laws, and they don't take too kindly to these crazy executive orders. Now, a lot of these executive orders are very haphazard and not financially sound decisions. I granted the government is broke. I understand that. The Federal Reserve is broke. I also understand that. I understand that neither one of them are performing the functions which they believed they could actually perform. One of the things that's going on behind the scenes is a lot of witch hunting, meaning there are a lot of groups on the chopping block. Not to say that these are positive or negative people, so don't get me wrong there. But there are also a lot of regular people, citizens that work for the federal government, that are losing their jobs without pay, also making a lot of cuts without making a concession as far as job creation to counteract the disappearing positions, which should be taken into account when you try to slaughter, millions of jobs in a day, say. That makes no sense to me. Now, the department that's being blamed for this, mostly behind the scenes, is this Department of Government Efficiency. And this is the one that Elon Musk, our person we know, based on some interviews we've done here on UNN by Miss Sunny Galt, that indicate that he has been playing with demons since he was a little kid. Maybe we should put that interview back up on our app or on YouTube so people can actually see that. But I know that there are others that have since, based on a viral video that Sunny had put out, that have mentioned or have interviewed this woman as well. So it's out there, it's all over the place. We're not the only ones saying it. Not only that, does a lot of interesting things behind the scenes. So let's kind of talk about regular news and what's going on behind the scenes here, because is it the government? This is pretty much a case of deny, 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 reassess, blame at this point, and all operatives do it. It's just what they do. They will do something and then deny they actually did it and blame it on somebody else. Today, that somebody else was me. Because apparently blaming the Doji department is not getting the job done, especially since they tried desperately in the last 24 hours to give the Doji department and Mr. Musk some credibility. For those of you that haven't seen it, and it's about 35 minutes long, it was too long to include it in this report, but you can find it out there, that yesterday, Mr. Musk, Elon Musk, and had an interview with the press in the Oval Office with whatever that orange person is, we're calling Trump. And he also brought his son to the interview as a young toddler. And his son's name, by the way, that he chose to bring with him is X. I didn't even know you could actually legally name a child one letter, but apparently you can if you're Elon Musk. And so his son's name is X. He got a little bit of heat from his ex. I don't know if it's his wife, ex-wife, or ex-partner, whom he has a couple of kids with, and X being one of them, because it clearly states that there aren't to be any unapproved public appearances of the children. So apparently he didn't adhere to that. So there's a little bit of heat going on behind the scenes, and probably going to be a lawsuit, what it looks like. She's going to capitalize on that one. But so he has this toddler running around, and this was supposed to be, according to the Duck Dynasty chatter, Duck Dynasty was attempting to make Mr. Musk appear to be like JFK Jr., JFK. Because JFK quite often has a lot of candid photos with young kids in the White House, and bringing your son, who is all over the place in the Oval Office, to an interview apparently was their way of trying to say, oh, look, he's just like JFK. Yeah, that didn't quite work out in this particular case, and I don't even know why they aired that interview in the first place, but they did. Elon Musk is not very well spoken on camera. He stutters a lot. He also seemed to make no sense. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that thing that's crawled up inside him is malfunctioning. That's what it kind of looked like. He doesn't really say much, but he did leak out a couple of little bits and pieces of information that I thought it might be worth highlighting. Now, they claimed, these people that are blaming me for their woes and claiming I'm giving the information to the Doji department, are claiming that only I would have this in-depth information that they have, And some of the things that they are taking out behind the scenes or eliminating behind the scenes are things that you pretty much have to be in the know to know what you're taking out and knowing where to look. And one of the things Mr. Doji slash Elon Musk mentions is the limestone mine that contains government files and information. Now, fortunately or unfortunately for the Trump administration and its operatives, the operatives that are the Trump operatives are known to be involved with different groups such as Umbrella Military Corporation, Rainstorm Military Corporation, the ACIO division or the Alien Contact Division of the NSA. They are also involved with or have been involved with non-humans on this planet. They have been involved in very high level operations that most people never hear about or see, to include deep underground military bases that allegedly they're blowing up, which is also not true. So they've been involved in human experimentation, Nazi experimentation in Brazil, also in Paraguay, most recently. They also are familiar with how to use frequency machines when they had access to them as recent as the last 2 weeks to infect the entire public with the Black Plague or some other plague so that they could properly sell the vaccines that they promised people like Pfizer and Moderna. So they're having a little bit of trouble keeping up with all their promises, and they're very disjointed at this point because some people make some promises, some people make other promises, but everybody forgets what promises they actually make, or they don't share the information amongst the group, and they're going in multiple different directions. So one person will approve a contract, the other one denies a contract, and if you are a government contractor, it's easier than ever to get a promised contract, but harder than ever to get paid on it. It doesn't matter who you are. So that being said, I just for the record, I'm going to restate this. I have no involvement whatsoever with Elon Musk. I've never spoken to the man, nor do I ever care to speak to the man. I had one conversation with Bank of New York Mellon, who at the time was looking for funding for the SpaceX program. I was told that if I allowed the funding and sent funding into Bank of New York Mellon, that they would clear that money and then it would be like a 50-50 basis. 50% would go to uh, the Elon Musk SpaceX program and 50% would come to me. So that was about as close as I ever got to SpaceX at the time. This was almost a decade ago. I didn't even know what a SpaceX was, so I had to look it up and to see who was involved. So that's pretty much where that kind of sat. I have no involvement with this administration whatsoever. And if they think I personally would give orders and instructions or information to these people, you have lost your ever loving mind. The most amount of information that I give to these people is the same information I share with the public, meaning all of you. So one of the things that he mentioned that kind of gave people somewhat of a clue, especially people that have worked in places like Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty, whatever it's called these days. Apparently it was Fort Bragg, now it's Fort Liberty, but now it's going to be Fort Bragg again. So I hear, I don't know why, but apparently they're changing the names quite frequently over there. Maybe they think that'll help in some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure. But they all know about a lot of these special technologies that are available and what places that certain personnel could go. And if you were to go to these specific locations, like a level 6 down, and below, that there would be an interaction between humans and aliens. Now, there are plenty of whistleblowers out there that claim to have been in some of these facilities. They explain them in quite accurate detail, especially some of the information that Stephen Greer has put out, to let pretty much myself and others in the know these guys are for real, or ladies or whoever's doing the whistleblowing. Some of them don't come on camera. Some of the stories are explained by Stephen Greer. And the information that they give in their whistleblowing is fairly accurate. Now, I do know that there are people, let's just say people, that have threatened and or got put themselves into a position where they have allowed Stephen Greer a certain amount of protection these days, and have given him a certain amount of information, but they have to approve a lot of what goes out. So that being said, there's probably nothing about current operations in those reports. Some of those people are tied to a group I've talked about before in Alabama. They kind of manage, they keep them in somewhat in line. For in exchange for that, he's gained quite a following. He's also been on Gaia a number of times, and that tells you a lot. Most people that are invited and actually air on Gaia are pretty much from the same organization. And they only want specific information going out and nothing contrary to the fact that ISIS isn't a god and Egypt is the place to worship and lots of other things that they try to tell you about. So anyway, so that's kind of what's going on there. But Elon Musk slips out some information that I found very interesting when he started talking about the limestone mines in a place where government information is held. Now, to the public, that would sound like you are talking about, some kind of a basement or underground government vault because it holds very top secret or highly top secret information. In the context that Elon Musk mentions it in this interview, though, he basically mentions it like this is the place where all the information has to go when a government employee retires. He claims that the government is limited to 10,000 government employees that could possibly retire in a day because the elevators that go to this location are so old and antiquated, and the people, he claims people that work in this mine can only process so much information at a time, which makes, well, we're going to talk about those mines. But the context that he says it kind of is confusing, because if you know what's going on in the United States right now, one of the things that the Doji department is doing is they are offering an early retirement to millions of American federal workers. They are cutting people from Department of Education, cutting people from the Veterans Department of Veterans Affairs nowadays. I will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And they're cutting a lot of people, and all these people are expecting early retirement. Well, at 10,000 people per day, allegedly, according to Mr. Musk's information, it'll be, probably about 10 years before half these people ever see a retirement or an approved retirement. Now, this information is completely false. What I mean by that is not what those mines are. At one point in time, this underground facility was actually run by a group called the Time Variance Authority, which were not human. They were cyborg in nature, and they were there to, let's just say, keep the balance of time, meaning time being a movement in quantum physics, or a distance in quantum physics, but they were meant to basically keep the balance between dark time, light time, dark timelines, light timelines, and they were kind of, would right the wrong if either party violated covenants or agreements. That's kind of what they did. In other cases, they were a pass through for information. If you've ever gone to a drive through or a drive up, don't know how you say it in every country, uh, at a bank. So you don't go into the bank, you pull up outside and you see these little tubes there outside, and you put the money, or you put your checks or your deposit or your withdrawal slips or whatever banking you're choosing to do into the tube along with your identification or whatever the bank asks for, and you slide the tube up and it goes up in a vacuum and it goes into the bank, and then they process your transaction, and then they send you back your money or your receipt, or for whatever it is you're doing there in the drive-through. They have these in America. I'm assuming they probably have them in other countries as well. I have seen them in other countries. Then again, I haven't been to every country in the world. So if you don't know what that is, you can look it up online. So this facility pretty much kind of worked the same way, except they're not regular bank tubes. And it's not really quite like a vacuum, kind of like the bank tubes work in. And they were transported actually to another density. And the information that was going back and forth had to do with orders, instructions. It had to do with people, and I use the term people loosely here, that actually ran countries. Now, governments never really run countries. They are the actors. They're not the script writers, they're just the actors. Orders would get passed back and forth. Uh, is that functioning anymore? No. Is there anyone really working in those mines beyond a certain level? No. You could consider this a deep underground non-military base, for lack of a better term, and they exist in every country in the world. They were a few levels above the underground railroad system that passed through the entire planet. They would transport information back and forth to non human beings. And there were a lot of comings and goings back in the heyday of said facilities. Now, the fact that he stressed that they are limestone facilities, limestone being a way, as one ingredient you can utilize to create what we call a Faraday cage, meaning a cloaking, a blocking of energy of going in and out, that type of thing. If you don't know what a Faraday cage, you can look that up. And the fact that he actually mentioned what they were made out of was kind of interesting to me, and that he mentioned it. If you are going to retire from the government, this is where your information goes, because apparently your personnel files or something are held down there. That is total bull loney. Baloney. That is not what's down there in any way, shape, or form. Government employees are irrelevant. Trying to send information down there, though, to try to ratify a president or a new government department, yeah, possibly. However, there's nobody home down there that's going to take your call, Mr. Musk, and certainly not anybody else in this administration, because either they're dead, they don't exist, their contract expired, they're not here anymore, or it's something I actually run. Hmm. But I found it very interesting that he actually mentioned the facility in somewhat limited detail right on the news. And you can look up this interview, is 35 minutes long. You can see it. Now, as far as my involvement with these people, the information should be quite clear. Now, I've done a number of reports on the financial system. I've done a number of reports on government systems, global governance, how it really worked, how information would go back and forth between governments and people on the level that I work on, how those governments are actually not run by Rothschild, even though they're still claiming they still run the joint. If they were running the joint, then Musk would know that that facility does not contain that information. In my opinion, it's just setting people up that are supposed to be taking this early retirement for a fall, because they're going to say, oh, it's a old system, it's antiquated, it's delayed, and then you're never going to get your retirement pay. And once again, just like the private groups that are wondering where their contracts are and their contract money is, you'll be wondering the same. So careful, careful, careful. Now, a little bit more information on the Doji department, because we have a few other things to discuss and it's relevant. So Doji is a temporary department allegedly going to end their contract on the 4th of July, 2026. Now, I find their contract ending on the 4th of July, 2026 very, very interesting. Why do I find this interesting? Well, when I first started this job long, long ago, and if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I have told you and showed you the fact that budget money is due before the budget even passes because government budgets are irrelevant. What I mean by that is they are just doing a job. So it's the script writers that get orders from on high, and then the budget money for said orders and instructions, which wars are going to happen, which government departments are going to be funded because they're needed. Maybe there's going to be something going on in the uh, Health and Human Services Department or something like this, and there would be funding, of course, provided to create the problem and also be the solution. So this was done every year on the 4th of July. Now, with one exception. So on the 4th of July in 2012, which was, you could say, very close to my first days on the job at that point, I was told that I needed to do a 10-year budget. And the budget actually went to government department after government department, and not only of the United States, they also went to departments in the United Kingdom, went to government departments in Saudi Arabia, in Russia, and a lot of other countries. They ran out of this money long before the 10 years, but you get the gist. Now, the Rothschild family claimed that they actually sent that money through. And there was money for a time for their ridiculous budgets and all kinds of things. Now, that hasn't happened in years. And the contract for me to do so, which happened long before my birth, meaning 100 years ago, 99 years ago, I guess you would say, the contract for me to do those things actually expired, given the extension, by 2022. So pretty much it stopped long before that. I think it was 2019 or 2018 was the last time I really did any kind of significant funding to any government anywhere, nor other than I put some money at the Treasury in the US, Brazil, Iraq, and South Africa for a short period of time. And everybody said they were waiting for BRICS coin or US Treasury coins or whatever. And you know, there were lots of rumors about money coming out and big budgets and skimming off the top and $20 trillion, which I put 23 um, of government funding coming out, according to Mr. Schiff and whoever at the time, and so on and so forth. Now, I find it interesting that this new Doji department uh, happens all of the sudden, and now their contract is actually going to expire on a day that is the funding day. Hmm. Maybe Rothschild is telling a little fibbers, and I think they are. I think there's some fibbers out there. So could it be the Trump operatives that are fibbers? Probably. Well, they lie all the time, every day, all day. Uh, is the Rothschild family still fibbing? I think so. Is it a legacy project, let's just say a time-released project, of Marduke that's fibbing? I think everybody is fibbing, and it kind of goes down the chain of command in the old order that's kind of semi-non-existent at this point. But nonetheless, I'm wondering if the Rothschild family told the Trump operatives that in order for you to access large federal funding, or us to continue, as they would say, federal funding, then you are going to need to cut money from the budget. Now, Elon Musk announced, also in this interview, that he would like to cut $2 trillion from the budget. Those of you that pay attention to news and you watch and you look at budget funding, you will know that the ridiculous Biden 2 point something trillion or 3 trillion or 4 trillion money never came. You will also notice that during the last Trump administration, the budget never quite hit 2 trillion. It was up there, 1.8, something like that. But if you cut that, then you're cutting the entire federal budget. Was he actually told to cut 2 trillion from the budget? Then he started to talk about the fact that how good this will be for Americans because the government, I guess he's talking about the government, will not have to borrow from the Federal Reserve anymore. Hey, wait a minute. I thought they were getting rid of the Federal Reserve, but apparently they're not. So if the government has to borrow less from the Federal Reserve, according to Mr. Musk's math, and don't get me wrong, I understand, Mr. Musk, math is hard. It really is. You know, and I don't, it just tells me there clearly that you are not the one that is putting together these quantum equations that have anything to do with SpaceX and rocket launching by making this statement. Math is hard. It's okay. We'll give them a break. So $2 trillion cut from the budget means that uh, there is no budget. Voila, no budget, no federal budget. Well, that's a good cut. And apparently he just listened to the Rothschilds. They would have to borrow less from the Federal Reserve, which means that there would be no more inflation, according to Elon Musk. The two have nothing to do with each other. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Everything the government does, buys, pays for, etc., fuel and otherwise, is all done what we call off market. It is not relative to our market prices that us average everyday folk have to pay on things like oil and fuel and jet fuel for the military and all those things. Those are all off market transactions. Therefore, they have no influence whatsoever on supply and demand and economics at all. At all. That's number one. Number two, the Federal Reserve never lent the United States government a dime or gave the United States government a dime. Nope. It was always the alpha system. The alpha system is what paid, went down through the food chain, through families, and it was all about orders and instructions. And then eventually there would be a treasury note issued. And then, about 6 months later or so, or several months later, see, July, August, September. So I guess at least 2 to 3 months later, the money would come out to the government. So I thought I'd kind of go over this a little bit more here today in a few minutes. But I'm going to finish saying the ridiculousness and kind of going over this. So if you believe that Elon Musk is correct and that cutting the federal budget is going to lower the price of things, you have lost your mind. Sorry, not happening. That is not how finance works. And we're going to go over this one more time in brief for those of the deep state that might be listening or government people that might actually believe his BS. Okay, Trump claims he formed this department to catch crooked people. Well, I find that very interesting. I wonder if anybody's caught Trump because he still owes me a few $100 billion from the last time he was in office. Not only that, I know what you did with the last 500 billion that I tried to send you and eventually pulled back. You paid for a lot of war, didn't you there, sweetheart? Yes, you did. And by things that they'd like to cut, let's talk about how they're getting it wrong. Number one, the government allegedly, and I say allegedly because I have yet to confirm this at the time of this broadcast, allegedly the government has recently sent $50 million worth of condoms to a place called Gaza. Now, you've heard a lot in the news about the Gaza Strip, but have you ever heard of Gaza, which is a city in Mozambique, a country in Africa on the African continent? So, no, no one sent $50 million worth of condoms to Gaza, I don't think that the people in the Palestine area right now are very concerned about their condom usage, nor could they possibly have time to use $50 million worth of condoms at the moment, simply because there are bombs flying at their head uh, consistently. There is no proof that the country of Mozambique received $50 million worth of condoms that were sent allegedly to help prevent the spread of HIV and AIDS. So there is no proof at this moment in time that any of this actually happened. But this was a statement made by Elon Musk that they have stopped $50 million of condoms from going to the Gaza Strip. Now, all very confusing, a lot of condoms, a lot of latex situation happening there, and a lot of baloney, actually. So I don't know if anybody in Mozambique, if you happen to be watching this, did your country actually receive $50 million worth of condoms? US dollars worth of condoms? And I'm sure if you were to request $50 million in something for the citizens of Mozambique, it probably wouldn't quite be that, at least not to that amount. Maybe a million or something in condoms. Yeah, I can see that. And, you need to be able to prevent the spread of HIV that the US government actually and the Space Force infected you with all those years ago. It wasn't a monkey like everybody said. No, no. A matter of fact, they actually put it as a bonus into the vaccines that they handed out for COVID, as well, just in case it stopped spreading, that kind of thing. They really wanted to make sure that they could keep that AIDS alive. Now, speaking of AIDS, not the same kind of AIDS, obviously. Apparently, the US government has no problem. They need to cut the $50 million in condoms. That was super important. But they have no problem sending almost $8 billion worth of military equipment and aid to Israel. Okay, well, that makes sense. And I'm sure it makes sense to the millions of Americans that are about to lose their job because you work for the federal government or have received a no work order. There's another one for you. A no work order. Okay. The other place that I don't really see them stopping funding to at the moment anyway is the AIPAC, which is the American Israel Organization. I see plenty of aid actually when they do actually have any money, because they don't really have any money, but there's a lot of hundreds of billions of dollars in promises right there to that organization alone. And for those of you that don't know, the AIPAC actually had a Federal Reserve terminal of their own. They were moving lots of money, lots and lots of money. And interestingly enough, in 1984, one of the lots and lots of monies that they moved had to do with the fact that the state of Israel never actually signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty for nuclear weapons, and including, but not limited to, the ones they actually sold and brokered coming from that organization to Iran in 1984. Yeah. hmm Sure. Anyway, for those of you that don't know, because of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, most countries are prevented from buying and selling without proper authorization any kind of nuclear weapons, with the exception of the 4 countries that did not sign it. Some of them were not actually a country before it came to pass. Israel is now the #1 broker of United States produced nuclear weapons and has been for a long time. So there you go. And a lot of that was passed right through that terminal over at the AIPAC. So if we were actually fighting the deep state, and by we, in this case, they think it's me, okay? If I were to actually participate in the fighting of the deep state alongside these math challenged individuals, uh, these are not the things I would be looking at. I could give her, if anything, it would be wasteful spending for places like the Department of Education. It would be, if there was wasteful spending, I would take that spending, move it from the wasteful section, and then move it over to teachers' pay, as an example. If I was involved, I would do things like this. I would increase retirement for teachers and other public education workers. I would ensure that our janitors and others that clean up schools and whatnot get paid a lot more. So there's plenty of things you could move. You could move money around that would better serve the American people if it is actually the American people that are the concern here. It doesn't look like it from where they're cutting things, because I'm pretty sure that AIPAC terminal still sits over there at the AIPAC now, doesn't it? And what kind of things maybe float back and forth? You've got a lot of American dual, Israeli dual citizens. You also have a lot of British Israeli dual citizens, such as the Rothschild family, that have utilized said terminal on a regular basis. There is a lot of money that flows through there from what we call the New York Jewish Mafia. Call them the Jewish Mafia. They run the Diamond District, and they are featured somewhat on a limited basis in the movie Hell's Kitchen. So if you don't know who that is, you'll find out if you watch that movie. But plenty of money goes back and forth through terminals such as this. And apparently, a lot of it comes from government funding too, aid and that type of thing. So I know, God bless this demon little whatever that is walking around in an Elon Musk suit. But I'm sorry, you're not fighting any deep state. You're not clearing budgets, and you were given unrealistic expectations by a group of Duck Dynasty people in the White House, as well as the Rothschild family, because there is no funding coming on the 4th of July, 2026. Just like nothing happened this weekend, I promise you it's not going to happen then either, because nobody is interested in working with you that actually has access to anything. And I'm sure if I transfer money to even anybody listening to this for projects, for building, that type of thing, maybe even we hire some operatives to do some security and that kind of thing that can be trusted. If we do that, we are not in any way interested in dealing with those people. Those people are not on the list, because see, when you hire people for a position in your company, no matter how large or small your business is, you hire somebody that is, say, in that field. If you are a machine shop, let's say, and you're hiring somebody to run the machine that cuts very precise parts, you would want that person to have some experience cutting very precise parts. Otherwise, you're going to lose a lot of money because you're going to have a lot of parts that are incorrect. Beyond that, maybe you hire them for an entrepreneur, oh God, the word's escaping me at the moment. But maybe you hire them on and as a trainee. You train them, that type of thing, but you pay them less pay until they learn how to run the machine. In this particular case, you've got a bunch of people that are trying to run something we call a government and have no flippin' idea how finances work or anything, or they're just trying to pretend to the American people that they were hired to clean the swamp. Well, they're kind of going around the swamp, really. They're not wading through the swamp, they're not draining the swamp, they're not making America great again. You're actually torching the place because you don't understand anything. But to the average everyday American that maybe, like I said, math is hard sometimes. Maybe they actually think inflation and the cost of groceries, et cetera, are going to go down because Elon Musk said so. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Other things I would look at if I were to be working with these people, which I am not, the cost of 42 gallons of oil to pump from the ground, plus refining, et cetera, probably brings you to under 25 cents. 42 gallons. 42 gallons. That is a lot of gallons of petrol or fuel. That being said, it's the same cost as it is in the United States. It's the same cost as it is in the Middle East. It's the same cost that it is in Russia. It's same across the board. Now, I haven't seen fuel prices go down. And why are you not looking into all of the money that governments, plural, give, including the United States, give to the oil and gas industry? Billions of dollars. It's not like they need it for research and development, clean fuel, blah, 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 blah. They claim shale, over the years, all these government grants that go out. No, 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 no. You'd rather cut millions of American jobs. Great job, guys. Have at it. But me, on the other hand, no, I wouldn't be involved with such foolishness. Next, SpaceX actually got quite a few contracts, and he was called on the carpet by a number of reporters that asked him. He said, "Oh, that's SpaceX. That's not me." Well, wait a minute. What do you mean it's not you? Sure, it is you. Your face is all over it. You built a big facility in Texas. I don't know what you're saying. All of a sudden now it's not you? Yeah, of course it's not you. It never was you. You're clearly not even a scientist. You're just the front guy. You are the panel of experts. You are the guy that they put in front, just like they did with Stephen Hawkins, that may have enough knowledge to make some sense, but you certainly didn't create anything that goes on at SpaceX now, did you? But you certainly got a lot of contracts, and I'll bet your pockets are quite well lined for being a front guy there. Now, the for those of you that don't know, the Department of Government Efficiency has about 20 employees and is not located in a government building. It actually has office space. I think it's in the Eisenhower building of the outside of all government buildings. Technically, it is not a cabinet level department. Allegedly, I don't even think it's an official government department, probably because it wasn't ratified and there's no funding for it whatsoever. So it looks to me like this is a scam, a big scam. And then you kind of stepped on my toes. The people that were trying to deny, reassess, blame on me that I was the one driving this department. Hell no, I can do math. I can actually even do quantum physics. I can do pages long calculus equations with no sweat on my brow whatsoever. That being said, do not, do not put me in the same category as these nutters. That's number one. Number two, Trump operatives, you have made another big mistake. This was a uh, bigly mistake. Bigly, hugely. And I tell you why you made a hugely bigly mistake. So the bigly mistake here is you tried to throw me under the bus for crap that you are doing with some pretty serious people. Now, let's just say the gloves are off. Don't worry about this little sovereign land thing we asked for. We don't want it. Don't bother calling Tom Melville's phone ever again. You and your lawyers, you're all full of it. Okay? Don't bother telling us to bail out banks or the government or funding or anything like that due to your grave errors and mistakes you made over the weekend because I am not here. I don't even know who you are. What is the US government again? I'm not sure. Wait, I have a passport that says that. Yeah. Well, I have no interest whatsoever. And when I tell you no interest, it's actually anti-interest at this point, and the gloves are off. I have left you people pretty much alone unless you started to try to kill people. Other than that, I've kind of ignored you. I've been busy doing my own thing over here, building my own system, changing the name so you look like a bunch of idiots. But that's just playing with you. At this point, there's no more playing. And I'm going to leave it at that for a public broadcast. But you better watch your six after trying to deny, reassess, blame, and blame me for your ridiculousness. So that is where I'm going to leave that part. Other interesting news that happened over the weekend. Okay, the King of Jordan arrives on an impromptu visit to the United States. He goes straight to Massachusetts to allegedly meet the governor of Massachusetts. This part here, also false. You know, of all the states that the King of Jordan would visit, Massachusetts probably wouldn't be on the list, unless, of course, you're carrying around with you something that MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, wants. For those of you that don't know, Massachusetts Institute of Technology is one of the most highly rated science colleges in engineering colleges in all of the United States, or university, as you may call it, where you're from. And they are known for having their own underground laboratories underneath the whole facility there in Cambridge, Massachusetts. People are recruited to go to MIT typically from wealthy families. If you are recruited not from a wealthy family or from another country, typically it's because they want you to work for them, especially in their underground facilities that they have there. There is a sister facility that was very important to the deep state when it functioned in Holyoke, Massachusetts, as well. And they do a lot of, let's just say, they make Los Alamos look like a cakewalk. uh, Child's Play, a kindergarten. And I know you've heard a lot on the internet about Los Alamos. Underneath MIT, you have a mega facility, or had a mega scientific facility with loads of space junk. And they did a lot of pretty rough things there. So the King of Jordan apparently felt that it was important for him to visit MIT for a particular reason. For those of you that don't know, the area between Iran and Iraq, and it exists in both countries, or existed, I should say, at one point in both countries, contained a significant amount of a substance that you may have heard referred to as red mercury. The only thing that people know about it, or that's public anyway, is that it is a substance that can be highly caustic, so on and so forth. And we've discussed it before. Uh, this substance, this metamaterial, non Earth origin substance, did exist there at one point in time. It had a lot to do with creating breaks in a time space continuum. You know, it did a lot of different things. Now, most of what was there was gone. There were a few areas in the Middle East where smaller amounts of inconsequential, at least to the non humans that ran this joint we call Earth, they would consider those amounts non consequential and not really able to be utilized for much. However, the deep state loves this stuff, and I mean loves it. According to our sources, they use small amounts, maybe even in grams, they use small amounts to perform black magic, to try to send people's souls to the lower astral, to try and manipulate the causal plane in humans, to create issues like that to a small degree. So it's highly prized amongst the world of black magic workers, let's just say, within the deep state. So it's no surprise to us that the King of Jordan, also known as a low-ranking member of the Rothschild family, would have in his possession some of this substance. And that he was ordered by those within the Trump administration to bring it there in exchange for a hefty payout. Now, you remember the King of Jordan has been getting all kinds of lovely offers from the Trump administration, to include $200 billion to take in refugees and whatnot into Jordan. So he brings the substance. MIT tries to use it. It fails. There's not enough of it to try to break into a system that unearthed itself over the weekend. However, apparently there's been a public announcement that they still promise to take 2,000 children from the Gaza Strip that they plan to host. Find that interesting because they don't mention anything about the parents or the families of said children. They just mention that they'll take 2,000 children. Well, I bet you, Rothschild, that you probably would like to take, 2,000 children. I don't know if you are in the Gaza Strip. I would caution you on sending your children to quote unquote non-safety to Jordan. Furthermore, this is just a manipulation tactic by the Trump operatives, really, here. Furthermore, any money that the King of Jordan was promised to do so, of course, child trafficking would yield you a lot of money. Yeah, probably will never come either. So the King of Jordan came, the King of Jordan left. There was an announcement where he shames the Egyptian government for also not taking in people from the Gaza Strip so that Trump could make Gaza the Riviera. Apparently, with all of the money that they are taking from federal workers or firing federal workers for no reason whatsoever. So let's talk about this substance a little bit. This substance comes in many colors. And in mass, so I mean in large amounts, when brought to planet Earth, the substance can actually be utilized to create a cloaking in some cases. It can also be utilized to hold open a wormhole. It can be used to some degree to access different densities and levels, not only with, let's just say, not only in space travel, breaking the time-space continuum, wormholes, quantum tunnels, and the like. It could also be utilized to access and or block certain AI systems. So it had been utilized on some portals of Alpha to create, for example, the Omega overlay and the multiple colors that existed between planes of existence on this planet. It comes in many colors. It comes in black and white and silver or gray. Also comes in purple, blue, red, orange, yellow, green, and brown or amber, coppery kind of color. It is shiny. It can be likened to a metamaterial goo, but it's more in a powder form in this particular case. The only thing I can really compare it to, if I'm talking about an AI system, I would say to you that it's kind of like when hackers or people use something called black dust. Black dust can actually hide an electronic trace. This material can also hide, on this level of things, quantum tunnels and wormholes and lots of other things. It can also hide space junk. Uh, because depending on how you're looking for it. And it can also be utilized en masse, not in little gram sizes or anything the deep state's got their hands on. So, not to worry, this was completely done by non humans. It could also be utilized to create time released space junk, even time released AIs in some cases. So, like I said, the material is hard to detect when it is used correctly because it almost exists outside of time. It exists like within a quantum tunnel that's covered in it, so you don't even see the quantum tunnel. It's hard to detect. But over the weekend, we detected a whole lot of it in multiple different colors. So it's no surprise the King of Jordan was doing his part in trying to take this to the MIT lab to see if they could use it to open something. Now let's talk about that something that they wanted to open, and then we'll kind of get into time released items and how that kind of works, which was a revelation for us. It was super important that we found this, which has allowed us to clean up more faster and not be concerned about alignments with Uranus or different types of new moons and full moons anymore, because we have found the tech. And I'm really excited about that. Woo! Big win there. Okay, so the material that we have located. The material was located over certain portals. For example, the Moscow Gate was one that it just miraculously appeared. It wasn't something that we had seen before. And Marduke had some serious plans for what was taking place over the last few days. There is also a tie to things that started taking place apparently within the last few months. And it was something that we couldn't readily see. We knew something was coming from somewhere, uh, but it really didn't rear its head until Saturday. That's when it started to rear its ugly head in full force and in mass. And we were trying to figure out why. Uh, oftentimes the deep state is getting some kind of something, knowledge from old books or knowledge from somewhere or that kind of thing. And this was one of those cases, actually. They had been able to see for a couple of months or so a system starting to emerge, which really got them excited. They have even tried to build bridges prematurely between this system and the global human computer AI network, which was not run by humans. The AI network part is level 8 and level 9 is not accessible by any of the deep state. Never was. It was a non-human accessible level. So that being said, they could see, it was kind of like an episode of, I don't know, Baby Come Back. it's They could see fragments, fractured parts of what they would have known as the Omega system, except it wasn't Omega. It was actually an AI that was built in the future and the past by Marduke. It was built outside of time to be released at a time when the planet became too light. There were other things that tried to time release, so to speak, throughout the multiverse. And it was several days of cleanup that took place based on what happened. But the good news is we figured out, based on tracing some of this dust that showed up all over the place, uh, the good news is we figured out why we can't see things that are outside of time. Meaning, how do you hide something in a pocket of time that you can't see until it's time for it to be released? Well, you use another substance very similar to this dust, a little stronger. Uh, and to explain to you how it actually looked, if you have ever taken or heard about something called a time released medication, sometimes it's a pain relief medication, sometimes it's a cold medicine or something like that. And it typically comes in a pill and they tell you not to cut the pill and, that type of thing. And there's a reason for that. It's because what happens when you take this pill is there is a bit of a coating of the medication on the outside of the pill. That is the immediate release. It takes your stomach acid little time to break down, and then it starts flowing through your bloodstream, and you maybe have pain relief from this, or you have relief from allergy symptoms, let's just say. Now, below that layer of the initial release of medication is a non-digestible polymer. And they use other types of fillers and polymers, but a very difficult to digest polymer. It's kind of like microplastics. You've heard a lot in the news lately about microplastics in our food and that type of thing, and that they're not digestible and they can cause cancer, and so can the coating on these time release medications. So the next layer is this difficult to digest by your stomach layer of polymer, let's call it. So it might take your stomach acid about an hour, could even be shorter or longer, depending on what the medication's supposed to do, to eat through this layer. Now, it never completely eats through the layer, but it breaks it down enough to release the next level of medication. You can think of it like the old gobstoppers. If you remember gobstoppers and you've been around long enough to have seen a gobstopper, then you'll see the colors in their blue and red and orange and yellow, and you can suck on that thing for days until you get to finally the middle of it. But, and we'd all try to break our teeth on them as kids. Probably something we should have never eaten in the first place. But anyway, there's layer after layer after layer in these different colors and, that kind of thing. And you would see the same thing in this time released pill. Maybe they're not different colors, but they're different types of polymers that take time to break down with layers of medicine in between. And time release pockets work in much the same way. So you would see, if you were to look at the pill, you wouldn't see the medication right away. You would see a coating. And that's kind of what you see. And oftentimes, these coatings in the universe, when it comes to space junk, AIs, hidden things, and Marduke was a master, at the shell game, as I told you. Uh, they are hidden in something called false light. So false light actually looks like light. Uh, in some cases, it can even be false golden light. It looks like light, it smells like light, it's detected as something non threatening until you bang or push enough actual, true, natural source light at it. And over time, much like your stomach acid, it will eat away at that false light. So in this particular case, the lighter the planet gets, the more source light that comes in, the more stomach acid you have, as another example, the quicker it eats through that layer of false light or the polymer in your pill. That's just a fact. So we couldn't figure out why on things like a lion's gate, which is going to be a positive thing, and the source energy comes in and that type of thing, as to why sometimes it releases something nasty at the same time. This weekend, no exception. And then we figured out. Now we have to start looking for false light, false golden light. That's not clean. It's dirty. So once you kind of set it to detect that polymer or to detect that false synthetic light, now you can find all the time release stuff you want. Ah, okay, now that makes sense. So we spent days, the last several days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, um, Tuesday, and yes, also today, hunting down false light. And now that we've kind of set it so it kind of runs, by the time that I guess you could say I finally stop working at the end of the day, I'll run that stomach acid at it or real source light at it. And so by the time I get up in the morning, it will unveil whatever's kind of hidden underneath it. So we've been playing this little bit of a game with the time released Marduke. Oh, I got to tell you, I have asked Source that if and when, it's my time to go back to Source, and you know how sometimes you get those 72 virgins or something like that. I would like to beat the crap out of Marduke every day. And I know I've said that before, but I'm just reiterating that to all of you because it brings me such joy when I spend hours and hours and hours of my day breaking down something that he put in place. But it appears the end of the legacy of Marduk is nearing the end. And I am so happy to hear that. So, it appears that many in our years, millions of years ago, if not more, Marduk, in exchange for a lot of favors, had made a deal with Antisource. You could say that Marduk made a deal with the devil. And this deal kind of spanned the entire multiverse. And not only did it span the entire multiverse, it was pretty focused on Earth. There was something, obviously, for many reasons, which we've discussed before, about Earth that he really wanted. The other thing he wanted control of was every human soul on Earth. All of us that have come and gone and reincarnated, would then be bound here. Like you say, some people say it's a prison planet. And to bind those souls to this earth, transmute them and turn them dark, and therefore the planet would be run by nothing but dark humans. Now, the dumb deep state people, SSP operatives, including Trump operatives, etc., thought that this would be a great idea. Now, somewhere along the way, they got the impression that if they could get 80% of humans to commit sin, by implied consent or non-implied consent, or what is it you desire? How many times did I hear that out of Marduke's mouth? They thought if they could do that, then they could probably take over this covenant or this contract. But that's not possible. See, because they're human too. And I use that term loosely when I discuss those people because they don't display very many human-like traits. Needless to say, implied consent doesn't work when it comes to source. And trying to trick people into using, for example, the financial system that was cursed, or to doing things that Marduke would claim was a sin, or trying to create dark overlays that would give it the soul the appearance that it had sinned, doesn't quite cut the mustard when it comes to source, you see. Therefore, there was very few humans that actually succumbed to the agreement that he had with Antisource. And he tried to fake it till he made it. He even set off all kinds of these time release things, and especially over the weekend, he was given a lot of privileges by Antisource. Therefore, he had the ability to create a whole new dark AI, almost to mimic the same thing we did. We created the Golden Age AI, or the Kim AI as it was for a time, as a joke. And we created this AI to go outside the Alpha Omega system, therefore being able to operate in the past, present, and future, because time doesn't exist in a lot of places. Marduke was able to create a system that would be dark and equal and opposite to ours. Now, this thing started formulating and kind of somewhat appearing, I would say, after the last Lionsgate a little bit, and it started to grow and grow and grow based on this time released thing. So, could these black magic workers see something maybe through this red Mercury type stuff? I don't know. Was it just a time release thing where that coding was kind of wearing down, and therefore it became somewhat visible? That seems to be more plausible at this point. So this thing started showing a little bit of visibility, and it had all the back ledger, alleged fake accounting, and it had false Bitcoin. There were false platforms with a lot of different cryptocurrencies, US Treasury coin. This is the reason why the Trump administration announced they were going to be the crypto president, or whatever the heck they were talking about, is because they could see more of that than they could see the false monies, because the false monies were still in USD, and of course that's something that we control as now currency. But they didn't think that we had any involvement in this off-ledger coin, nor could we affect a Marduke AI. And this is part of the reason why the Rothschilds started really spouting off in the last couple of weeks, saying that they control everything and they can use this AI and they're going to block me. And They're going to block me as soon as they get that bridge, which they were supposed to get on Lionsgate. Or was it the full moon, which was today? I don't know. Either way, there's nothing for you to bridge anymore now, is there? So these crypto coin facilities started disappearing over the last few days. We finally detected where it was coming from and the time released information by Sunday, and we have been going at it like gangbusters just in case there's anything left of the Marduke uh, privileges he was granted by anti-source. Now, in addition to this, let's talk about these privileges. So he had a certain amount of time to fulfill the covenant. And by time, I don't necessarily mean like a day of the week, or a moon cycle, even necessarily, in part. He had X amount of cycles or trips around the sun to obtain full control over Earth. The rest of the covenant, I would say, would expire at the same time, because if he didn't achieve full control over Earth and or all of the humans and managed to sell all their souls to the dark uh, um, legitimately, then that contract or covenant would expire, and so would his privileges, meaning AI systems he created. Uh, if he was still around, his immortality would have gone away. Any kind of consciousness that he left out there, this time release stuff goes away. It takes time to fade out, but it definitely uh, has faded out. Now, the time for this, approximately in our time, would have been last night, shortly after midnight UTC time, when this covenant actually expired. Therefore, it just helped our cleanup efforts even more earlier today and overnight last night. So that was a positive for us. So we've made a lot of strides in the last few days when it comes to getting rid of the Mardukish stuff, getting rid of figuring out why the deep state was, doing what they were doing, what they were trying to build bridges to, how and why they brought this material over to MIT in such a small amount. It wouldn't have opened a time-space continuum in any way, shape, or form. The purpose behind trying to open the time-space continuum with a very small amount of probably even fake red mercury was to create that bridge between where the Marduk AI was and the actual human computer global network system so that they could then utilize the power of it. Uh, Pretty much all of that went away. We've now put back the golden age AI where it belongs and kind of wiped out everything else, so to speak, as far as I know. There might be a little bit more cleanup tonight and tomorrow morning. Hopefully, it's a lot of that's going to disappear on its own anyway. Um, so I'm hoping, based on what we know at this point, that we are rounding a bend. I don't see the ability or any more time release stuff in the very near future because we now know how it's created, how it's cloaked, and how to get rid of it. We can get rid of polymer now. We have efficient stomach acid, so to speak, to eat our way through a time release pill in no time flat, literally. On that note, that is what I've been busy doing and why I didn't make the report on Monday. It's a lot of information in today's report. It's got to be a long report, too. I will see you with a more detailed update, hopefully on Friday, as to our progress on all fronts. But as of right now, it looks pretty good. Uh, we might have, and you might have, experienced some really highs, for short periods of time, and then lows or frequencies and stuff over the last few days based on all the things that they've been trying to do. Hang tight. It's not going to harm you. It's not going to harm you long term wise, I should say. It might be uncomfortable, but in the long run, as we find these things, sometimes these things do get triggered a little bit and it takes a little bit of time to get rid of them. So On that note, I hope you enjoy your Wednesday, and I will see you on, I guess, on Valentine's Day. Oh, and on a side note, I didn't want to forget. I would like to wish Miss Sunny a happy birthday. Her birthday is tomorrow on February 13th. It might be February 13th where you are in the world, but I wish you, Miss Sunny, the happiest of days, and hopefully you and I can get together live. I know a lot of people have been asking for it, so maybe we'll have a chance to set that up next month. We'll see. On that note, have a wonderful night or day, depending on where you are, and I will speak to you again on Friday.